Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to welcome you here this morning. My name is Juan Pablo Hofmeister. I'm with the Green Climate Fund. And we will be having today, we're delighted to be sharing the stage with our colleagues from the GEF and our distinguished panelists that will be sharing views as we present to you today this undertaking that we have started with the GEF since last year. Collaboration with the GEF has been ongoing for many years, but since last year we decided to engage on a more structured long-term vision, and that's what we will be sharing with you today. Of course, also welcoming your question and feedback, as this is not a static vision that we're putting forward, but rather a long-term outlook for collaboration. So the plan for today, we will be having some welcoming remarks from His Excellency Sonam Wangdi, Permanent Secretary of the National Environment Commission of Bhutan. And after that, we will be introducing the main elements of the long-term vision. So without further ado, I would like to invite His Excellency to give some opening remarks.
Thank you, colleagues from GEF and GCF and members on the dais, distinguished participants. It's my pleasure to be here today at this very important meeting. Let me start by stating that I welcome the long-term vision on complementarity, coherence, and collaboration, that's LTV, between Green Climate Fund and the Global Environmental Facility. It is very important that these two institutions are committed to maximize synergies and to support countries on their climate action for greater impact. Also, recognizing that there are still gaps in climate finance, we welcome the commitment to minimize potential duplication and to provide support smartly. As a least developed country located in the fragile mountain ecosystem in eastern Himalaya, the impacts of climate change severely impact lives and livelihood of our communities. Our key economic sectors like hydropower and agriculture are highly sensitive to the adverse impact of climate change. For instance, more than half of our population resides in rural communities and are dependent on agriculture for sustenance that is highly influenced by climate change impacts. Both the global and national climate projections indicate worsening conditions. Mindful of the climate prediction and projections and their impacts, we have renewed our focus on building adaptive capacity and resilience to the impact of climate change, especially in the water and agriculture sectors. Given the limited resources, it is very important for us to be prudent in how we use our resources that will deliver the highest impact. Bhutan as a country is directly benefiting from the coordination of GEF and GCF. For example, the GEF LDCF project on advancing climate resilience of water sector, which was approved by LDCF/SCCF Council in June 2021, is expected to be implemented soon. This $10 million project is going to enhance resilience and sustainable economic well-being of the people of Bhutan through climate adaptation in the water sector. The project will ensure safe and reliable water supply and improved catchment projections in 4 of our 20 districts, ensuring 20% coverage that form a major part of the Punachangchu River Basin, one of the 5 main river basin management units in Bhutan, as well as the largest in terms of geographical area and among the most climate vulnerable watersheds in the country. Bhutan's first Napa project focus area was also in the same basin that helped lowering of the glacial lake to avert glacial lake outburst floods through installation of early warning systems and hazard zonation. This GEF LDCF project builds upon the GCF project that is supporting climate resilience and transformational change in the agriculture sector and NAP readiness project in Bhutan. Going forward, Bhutan is requesting the GCF to build on GEF 7 LDCF project and its results. The joint support project indicates that the collaboration by the GEF and GCF is benefiting Bhutan and our communities to address impacts from climate change and build resiliency in water and agriculture sector, drawing upon priorities identified in nationally determined contributions, findings of ongoing assessment of National Adaptation Plan and National Adaptation Program of Action, the NAPAs, while remaining consistent with Bhutan's development philosophy of gross national happiness. When GEF and GCF support can be planned in synergy and with coordinated national efforts, this has potential to ensure building adaptive capacity and resilience in agriculture and water sector in entirety of Bhutan. Based on this experience, I am quite excited by the potential that long-term vision can offer to many developing countries, especially LDCs, including Bhutan. Furthermore, having worked closely with GEF and GCF, I have high expectations for the LTV to deliver for the countries. I would like to see more proactive joint program efforts to help countries to identify and pursue important common themes for climate action. I would like the GEF and GCF to help countries identify and facilitate opportunities for blended, parallel, and sequenced finance. And I would like the LTV to support streamlined and coordinated country consultation processes to develop investment plans. My country, Bhutan, is ready to collaborate with GCF and GEF on the LTV and look forward to learning more about concrete opportunities in this session as well as follow-up discussions. We will extend our full support in implementation of this strategic initiative. Once again, I welcome this GEF and GCF collaboration and would like to thank both the institutions for this opportunity and platform to share our perspectives. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is quite a mandate that we take from you in this vision that you're also setting, and I know I speak for both organizations when I said that those expectations you have outlined are precisely the objectives we hope to achieve through this joint initiative. So with this, I would like to now turn to my colleague Chizuru for a presentation that I will be also complementing from the GCF perspective too, after which we will be going to our panelists to enrich with their perspectives. Chiz?
Thank you so much, Juan, and thank you so much, Mr. Sodam. And thanks to all of you for being here. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this event and present to you the long-term vision of complementarity, coherence, and collaboration between the GCF and GEF. So I'm going to talk to you about what is the LTV, what's included in LTV, and either Juan or I guess Carolina will talk about the progress we've made within the past year and the way forward. So next, please. Oh, you're doing that? Okay, thanks. So in essence, so what exactly is an LTV? It is a roadmap for the two institutions, which are the GEF and GCF, and these institutions are the operating entities of the financial mechanism for the climate convention here. So it's a roadmap for the two institutions to work together. And the aim of the LTV is to really define and articulate specific areas of cooperation and where complementarity of action might be more or most efficient and effective, and to explore possible modalities to generate longer-lasting mitigation and adaptation outcomes. For the GEF, the effort covers all the funds we have under the GEF family. So it's the GEF Trust Fund for Mitigation, as well as the Least Developed Countries Fund, LDCF, as well as the Special Climate Change Fund. So the vision has been developed jointly between the two secretariats, and I do want to acknowledge the very strong leadership demonstrated by both the executive director of GCF, Yannick, as well as the GEF CEO, chairperson, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez. They have been working together very effectively, as well as they're very committed to make sure that the LTV is not only well conceptualized, but also very well implemented, and also, I would say, benefiting the countries moving forward, and as well as a climate agenda. So the effort itself is building on the experiences that we have gained, as well as ongoing efforts that we have had with GCF. And so since, I would say, June of 2018, when we had the last GF assembly, we decided to work together to do what's called a pilot coordinated engagement. And those were to support countries to synergize the programming of resources available by the GCF and GEF, and to enhance channels of communication. And I should mention, and Lando's here, thanks so much for joining our panel. We are doing this also because we have received a lot of guidance from parties in the CCC process that we are both encouraged to further articulate, build on the complementarity and coherence within the financial mechanism of the convention. So we're also hoping that this will pave the way for coordination and collaboration across other funds and programs that are working in climate change too. So next, please. So very quickly, the vision includes three elements. The first one is collaborative and coordinated programming. The second one is sharing of information, lessons learned, and knowledge. And the third element is communication and outreach. And I will quickly talk about what those are. And Juan or Carolina can actually then mention a little bit more about what progress has been made within the past year. So on the coordinated support for major initiatives and programming, as the little phrase implies, we are working to collaborate and actually support coordinated programming efforts in countries. And how are we doing this? First, we're doing this by articulating and figuring out ways to support what we call major initiatives. And today on the panel discussion here, we will also hear from one of the major initiative efforts that have recently gone to the GCF board, and it's coming to the LDCF and SCCF council meeting in 2 weeks, and that's on the new phase of the Great Green Wall. So we've made concerted efforts to support major initiatives working together, and we were very happy that we have the country representatives as well as the agency representative to share a little bit of their perspectives on how we're working on these major initiatives together. We're also exploring opportunities for the Amazon, SFM Red Plus initiatives, and we'll also develop initiatives focused on priorities at the regional or specific country levels, and we're looking at how can we actually support initiative in SIDS, major initiatives in LDCs, and also elements related to private sector collaboration. Obviously the funds will go into this with to be able to provide support in line with each fund's strengths and to make sure there is very much limited duplication of efforts. It's more to do with ensuring that there is good coverage from the respective institutions to support efforts that need to be supported for for climate action as well as impact. The second one is second element of the collaborative and coordinated programming is called the National Investment Planning. And here we are planning to support country-owned national planning and priority setting for programming. And we want to do this upon request in up to 5 countries. And we think the start of the new GEF phase called GEF 8 from July of this year, as well as the GCF, I guess, 2 period that's just around the corner, will provide good opportunities for countries to really think about how to build their investment plans that would tap into both the GCF and GEF resources. And timing is of the essence in this particular exercise, so we'd love to hear from countries as well as some suggestions as to how we can do this in a way that would have the most impact. And we're also developing a list of activities or programs that each fund will prioritize. And implicit in this is, I think the GEF has its own comparative advantage, and so does GCF. So what are we going to prioritize? And also, what are we not going to prioritize so that we can actually lean on each other and lean in on each other's programming as well as strengths to move forward. Okay, so the second element is the sharing of information, lessons learned, and knowledge. They're having a lot of information sharing that have been ongoing, I would say, on an ad hoc and informal basis. We want to build some structure to this and really focus on sharing of lessons learned from the portfolio to really strengthen implementation of the respective portfolios as well as respective fund delivery. And we want to also do joint development and applications of guidance products. And one of the elements that have been asked by the countries is, can you look into sort of trying to harmonize methodologies for project design, some of the measurements, indicators, and things like that, because that would make the countries' lives a lot easier, I would say, in terms of having to report on the projects as well as their impacts. So this is something we're very much actively looking into. And the last element is a communications outreach. An important element is that it's not just about talking about LTV. There has to be some reflections as well as embracing of the concept as well as the efforts in the strategic documents as well as information outreach that the 2 institutions do. So in that effort, in that regard, we just finished the replenishment negotiations for the GEF. And in the official replenishment documents, as well as the LDCF and SCCF programming strategies, we made sure that the elements of relevance to the LTV were well reflected so that there will be very clear entry points within the GEF and LDCF, SCCF programming that would be suitable, if you will, with the LTV possibilities in mind. So, and we're also doing more enhanced outreach and communication efforts. The side event here today is one such effort. But we will also have a joint pavilion, inshallah, in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. And that's always that will be the 3rd time we will have a joint pavilion. And it's always been a very good opportunity and learning opportunity for the 2 institutions to work together, but really have enable us to think about what kinds of themes and events and stakeholders that we want to engage jointly to really make advancements on the climate actions and building of potential, as well as climate impacts. So we will continue to do that in the Sharm el-Sheikh in 5 months or so. Okay, next slide, please. So very quickly, this is my last slide before I hand it over to the GCF colleagues. After the LTV document was presented to the GF Council and GCF Board in June of 2021, we started to work to operationalize and also to launch the LTV. And once again, the executive director as well as CEO are both quite engaged and committed to the LTV, and they were instrumental in making sure that the LTV will be off to a good start by engaging in launching activities. I would say the highlight has been a meeting with the UN Secretary General in October 2021 in New York, where the two heads of the institutions had an opportunity to brief the Secretary General about the LTV and its potential to facilitate access to climate finance. And as we all know, that is a theme that the Secretary General would like to see advancements. And there are discussions ongoing follow-up to that particular meeting on how we could work together with the Secretary General and the two funds on common themes of interest as well as priority. Hopefully by the time we go to Sharm, we can say more about that, right? We also had an official launch event at COP26 at the GEF GCF Pavilion, and where we heard expectations at that time from various countries and regional representatives. And today, I think beyond just hearing expectations, we can actually report and hear from countries and agencies as to how this has been working so far by focusing on a specific example. So I'm very happy that there is some progress to be shared. We also had a very high-level ministerial launch at the IUCN World Congress event, which was, I think, in Marseille in France in September 2021. So, I mean, these were the events as well as preparations that we have taken place, we have organized to launch and also operationalize the LTV. So now let me pass the baton on to Juan, who will talk about the progress made so far, the actual operationalization steps, and the way forward.
Thank you very much, Chis. And in this case, actually, I'm stepping in for my colleague, Carolina Fuentes, Director of Programming, who unfortunately couldn't make it here on time. But let me, I think Chis has already done the heavy lifting on the content of what is in the LTV. I will now take an opportunity to go over a couple of the key steps that have occurred since July last year. So first, the two secretariats have convened a steering committee that was established precisely to sort of give direction and to ensure the integration and implementation into operations of this long-term vision in the work of the two institutions. This steering group meets every few months and looks at the different initiatives, both on issues related to coordinated programming, as well as the possibilities at country level, both in terms of the major initiatives as well as some of these other exercises that will be taken forward, already mentioned by Chis. The senior leadership engagement, I think that was already very well reflected, but the two heads of the institutions meet basically as often as possible, most recently at Stockholm Plus 50, and to continue to provide momentum and through the leadership set the vision for what are some of the opportunities for collaboration that we are to take forward. I think that Chis has already outlined through this leadership of the CEO and the GCF ED some of these options that we see going forward. For example, in better coordination on work related to SIDS, better coordination on some of the other initiatives. I look forward very much in a few minutes to hearing from Edie on the experience with the Great Green Wall and setting the vision forward in this regard. Now, I think that we're about to launch this study. We have already finalized the terms of reference where we are really sort of trying to take an inner look at ourselves and better understand what are the processes that can be better streamlined, where are the opportunity, where are also where there might be some points of contradiction between the processes that we ask of our agencies or accredited entities, and of course of countries who ultimately are who we are hoping to benefit the most from this effort. And we of course hope to now see the study come to fruition over the course of the next year. And last, and again, was already mentioned, it's to actually see not just reference, but actually see a reflection of this vision in relevant documents. In the case of GEF, of course, this has already, as mentioned by Chis, been the case in the LDCF and the SECF strategy, as well as the replenishment documents. In the case of GCF, we're about to begin this process of replenishment, where we will be setting forward similar documentation, as well as in other key documents. For example, just a few weeks ago, we at the GCF adopted a revised simplified approval process, where we integrated as well the opportunities for a better scaling up, not only in this case of GEF, also adaptation fund, of course, but it's important to see this vision integrated, and that's what we've been trying to do over the past year. Next slide. So we will be hearing a little bit as we go in depth on some of these major initiatives. Of course, over this first year, we have seen very important progress with not only scaling up the work that the GEF had started during GEF 5 in the Great Green Wall, but actually now see a new vision also in collaboration with UNCCD, where we have come in and are beginning a process of co-investment. GCF has approved a few of the initiatives already from the GCF board side. GEF Council is about to consider some further investment as well as in the upcoming council meeting, as well as, of course, as part of GEF 8. We are beginning this dialogue of programming with countries. We just had a programming meeting in Antigua and Barbuda, where we had the opportunity to also invite our GEF colleagues to have an in-depth discussion on where the opportunities are, and we hope to do more of this over years to come. I think, of course, there was already mentioned of the joint outreach at COP26. And we are currently also in the process of trying to put a lot of what has been said today in writing in the form of a progress update that will be going to both the GEF Council and the GCF board. So my last slide, thank you. Looking ahead. So we are continuing to explore where are the opportunities for coordinating investment, where are the opportunities for enhancing the work that we do with agencies and with countries. We also look forward to hearing your ideas. As I said at the beginning of this event, this vision is not set in stone. It's a vision that evolves as country needs evolve, and where we're trying to adapt as we go implementing. We're also trying to launch this pilot. As she's mentioned, we're looking for engaging with 5 countries in a pilot engagement, looking at better understanding national investment planning and what we can do better to assist countries as they engage in this type of exercises. We all know we're now in a new phase when it comes to NDC and NAP implementation. A lot of countries have already done the formulation of these documents, the relevant updating. What does it actually mean to engage now in this process of beginning to convince stakeholders, to begin to understand sort of where the opportunities lies for blended finance, for grant finance, et cetera, as part of the implementation of these initiatives. And these are some of the things that we hope to do as part of this national investment planning exercise. Of course, we'll continue to try to integrate this vision in relevant policy documents. And we also look forward to continuing to have this type of exchanges where we can actually do outreach, we can hear what the opportunities are, where the challenges are as well, and that this becomes a long-term vision where we are cooperating with outside stakeholders and addressing those concerns. So that brings it to the end of the presentation. So we'll perhaps maybe take a few minutes to see if there are any burning questions. We have reserved some time for some questions at the end, of course, but I'm very keen to go to our panelists and hear from them on their perspectives and their reflections on the way forward. So let's see if there are any questions. Otherwise, we'll go to the panel. Yes, please. If you can please introduce yourself, and thank you so much.
Virginia Young, Griffith University. I'm not sure if I've got this on or not. I've just wondered, are the terms of reference publicly available? And will all these slides be available as well? And a sort of third question, do you see this explicitly as a vehicle for delivering integrated climate and biodiversity action?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions. So you mean the terms of reference for the LTV itself? Then it's already posted, because the concept actually went to both of our governing bodies back in June, and that highlighted what exactly the LTV will consist of. So from that perspective, that document is already available since June of last year, and we'd be happy to share the reference with you. And what was your second question? Yes, we will make them available. And the third one was a question on the biodiversity. Yes, so as you must be aware, the GEF is the financial mechanism for biodiversity. So anyhow, we are supporting, for instance, the early action grants for all the countries, all the member parties for CBD, for them to get ready for the implementation and planning for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as there is going to be a significant amount of resources that will be made available for biodiversity efforts in GEF 8. Between the GEF and GCF, on this LTV, we will, of course, look into projects and programs that would have multiple benefits, with climate being the central entry point. But, if you're looking at Great Green Wall, of course, it also has land degradation as well as other benefits. And we will also be looking into elements such as Amazon and other areas. So by the virtue of the complex nature of projects and programs that would have significant climate benefits as well as biodiversity and other elements, we will be looking at those things in a systematic way.
Okay, thank you. I really have nothing else to add. So with this, I think we'll maybe now turn to our panel. And I would like to start with Edie, if you can also introduce yourself. But, thank you. You see, that's why it's part of the long-term vision to have very collaborative ideas on the spot. Thank you. So first we have Mr. Edie Nang, Head of Environment at the Regional Office and Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Senegal. We're also joined today by Ms. Janie Rieux of IFAD. And Mr. Yolando Velasco of the UNFCCC Secretariat. We will be also joined in a few minutes, hopefully, by Ambassador Diane Blacklane of Antigua and Barbuda. So with this, I'd like to now then turn to you, Edie, for your perspectives and your reflections on what we have presented. And I would like to invite you specifically, Senegal has been engaged in the Great Green Wall initiative since the very inception. And we're, of course, very pleased to see that your engagement in this new phase continues. So if you could perhaps share with us what are your key priorities as a country to be addressing this new phase of Great Green Wall, and for the region as a whole, of course, and, of course, therefore, your expectations of us, GCF and GEF, working together. So over to you, Edie.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Juan. It's a pleasure to see you again here in Bonn. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Doji, to get me involved in this side event today. So my name is Idi Nyang. I'm working with the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Senegal. So I'm in the process quite long, since 2007-8, I think. And I was negotiating on all. I start with mitigation, CDM, and then after adaptation, and loss and damage now. And I was the DNA chair, was also in the executive committee, and now I'm in the adaptation fund. So that is quite many things that I did since I am in the process until now. So this is the, let me first start by giving maybe some quick overview of the climate change, first by the 11 countries in the Green Wall, so region, including my country, Senegal. So we are among the most vulnerable in the world. And most of them also, these 11 countries, are less developing countries. So, and we all know that the climate projection indicate that precipitation level will continue to decrease in this region, and temperatures are expected to increase between 1 and 1.7 from 2031 up to 2050. So we start feeling this increase in temperature in the countries within Senegal, Mali, Chad, and also we feel this. So compared to 1986, 2005 period. So I think these climate projections show that the Green Wall region will be facing significant impacts, and they need to address as regional and country priorities. So, for example, the agriculture production is expecting to drop by at least 20% in the region, so which will reduce food availability and farmers' incomes. Also, the region is facing a reduction of natural capital, and the population in the Sahel region is expected to double by 2040. So they will put additional pressure on food security, sustainable livelihood, and ability to cope with the climate extreme in the region. So I think the perspective from Senegal at the national level is maybe to still work very closely with the GCF and the GEF to develop projects in these sectors like agriculture, so also in planting, rehabilitating biodiversity in some sectors and some areas. And if we took the Green Wall, even in Senegal, since we start planting and putting in defense some part of the Great Wall to allow the ground and the biodiversity to come again. So I think that is some perspective that we have in the project developing this Green Great Wall in the part of Senegal. So that is a very large perspective that we have, and we want maybe to follow the cooperation that we're having with the GEF and the Green Climate Fund on that aspect. So these are the priority also in the region and the country level need urgent support to address those points. And I think if you take some region in Senegal like Louga, Kaffrine, and all, they are a place which is really dedicated for farming. And then we have some project already implemented in that sector with regard to farming and agriculture. And those perspectives maybe need more support to be addressed very efficiently by the country. So Senegal and the Green Great Wall countries had been asking for renewed support for the Green Wall program. as we know that the region and country is facing significant challenge and priorities. And so we are glad to see that the new phase in giving special emphasis on climate change adaptation in the region. We are also working closely with the GEF and the GCF to mobilize additional adaptation finance to support our adaptation and mitigation priorities at the national level. So we understand that the new regional project by the LDCF and the GCF with IFAD will build climate resilience of vulnerable people and foster socio-economic supportive environment for government institutions. Community organizations and private sector and other funding agencies to work jointly to address systemic challenge that the green world countries are facing. So countries need support for coordination and collaboration. So we are encouraged that the new phase can establish a collaboration mechanism which build on existing green world collaboration framework and create synergy between action to restore the environment and strengthen climate resilience of vulnerable people. So if you know those regions that where the green group world will cross, maybe we'll see that there are most vulnerable population living there, and the farmers and agricultors have very big difficulties with regard to the reduce of the rainfalls. That is a very big issue for them to be resilient and with regard to adverse effect of climate change. And in addition, the collaboration gap will face a knowledge gap on adaptation and digital technology gap. I want to learn more about how the new phase can address these gaps. So that is for me a big issue that maybe we want to see how to fill the gap. Last but not least, our country's community and entrepreneurs can benefit enormously with support for innovative solutions for adaptation. We have great ideas and solutions that are just waiting to be implemented with some earlier support, and I understand that the LDCF portion of the new Green Grid World initiative will build a dedicated innovative fund. I am sure this will receive enthusiastic support and demand. So, new expectation, the GEF, particularly the LDCF, has been strong support of Senegal and other countries in the Great Green World region for the last 2 decades. The GEF has also been providing support to the GGW on both mitigation and adaptation. Our expectation is to build on their unique strengths, past experiences, and ability to support innovation to facilitate scale-up adaptation. We are happy that the GEF and the GCF decide to provide coordinated support to the new phase of the Great Green World through the LTV. Access to climate finance is a major challenge that many countries, especially the LDCs, face. Any effort by the 2 main climate finance institutions to work together to help countries for better access and to support major priorities are quite welcome and also needed. We have high expectations from the LTV as Senegal and LDCs. Can the GCF and the GEF support more major initiatives that target the LDC's priorities? We are also ready to engage with the LDC's group and as the individual countries to engage and discuss to help identify possible major initiative. Also, can we request targeted outreach for LDCs to learn more about the access to GEF and DCF support? I think countries want to learn more about the LTV and understand how this can support countries better. Finally, I would like to see at least one LDC take part in the joint investment planning development. And Senegal is happy to volunteer for that. And so I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and we certainly look forward to working with you and with Senegal and continuing to take leadership in the region and through this exercise. I think that it will be very timely. So thank you very much for that very rich perspective, and it actually comes now to be complemented by our colleague Jenny from IFAD. Given the role that IFAD has played in bringing this new phase of the Great Green Wall to fruition. So, Jenny, I'd like to turn to you. You recently submitted 2 interlinked proposals to GCF and GEF on the new phase of the Great Green Wall initiative. And this is going to be, as we have already mentioned a few times, one of the major initiatives to be jointly supported by the 2 institutions. Now, the GCF proposal has been approved, and the GEF proposal is going to the Council in a couple of weeks. Can you tell us about IFAD's engagement in developing this new initiative, what your aims are, and the expected outcomes?
Thank you very much, Juan, and cheers for the invitation to this session. So it's really a pleasure for IFAD to have taken the responsibility, let's say, to prepare the regional support program for the Great Green Wall with the GCF, working closely with countries and different stakeholders in the region, as well as UNCCD. And it's even we're really looking forward also the regional support program with the GEF, LDCF, focusing on adaptation. We think that's, of course, being both with IFAD would really allow us to implement them both end and end as one program. So that's really an opportunity for countries and for, in a way, implementing this long-term vision. So we're really excited about this. And it's been quite a process because it took, we started the GCF programs in 2020. So it took, let's say, a year and a half until approval, because the program itself is it's a component of also a larger investment. So there's also the investments in terms of inclusive green financing for adaptation and mitigation that will be implemented in some of the Great Green Wall countries. And there's other projects either approved or in the pipeline that will cover all the other countries, as well as from different accredited entities. So it was quite a process in terms of several, and during COVID, to have so many consultations and so many studies. But that has really made the design of the GEF program very efficient, because we had a lot of the information. And we could ensure really the synergies and the complementarity. So the GEF LDCF Great Green Wall Climate Change Adaptation Regional Support Program, the objective is really to improve access to best practices, to foster innovation and digital transformation, and to facilitate cross-learning across the Great Green Wall to enhance resilience. And this basically will be done through 3 main components, let's say, or outputs. The first 2 are similar to the GCF Great Green Wall Regional Support Program, so that will really work in synergy. So the first one is really on knowledge management, so knowledge generation, knowledge exchange, knowledge management, on all aspects related to the Great Green Wall. So we're following the Great Green Wall pillar, let's say, of the accelerator. So that will be, there will be dedicated knowledge product, including a state of adaptation in the Great Green Wall countries, flagship report. There'll be also community of practice that'll be established, some annual events where country can exchange, and there'll be also coordination, more enhanced coordination in the Great Green Wall countries on NDC and NAP for programming adaptation options. So we'll have also these sorts of exchanges. The second component will be on innovation and digital transformation. So on that, first we'll start with a stock take to really know what's our baseline in the different countries, and then and see which and that will involve also the private sector. So we'll have fair with the private sector, and those activities will have will be done in each of the country, but also have a regional sharing. So all the components are connected. And then there's also an aspect of the innovation that will look at gender responsive innovation. So we'll also kind of zoom in to look in more depth at options that are really more specific to women. And then the third outputs, it's really on these innovation grants that my colleague from Senegal was mentioning. So that we will have some small grants for innovation. So as we look into this innovation, we can already start to implement some underground for in the different countries, and that will be associated with. So it would be a bit of a competitive process, but that could be also later upscaled through further, through GEF 8 projects or through GCF, and that will be linked to capacity building and to M&E, connected to these innovation grants. So those are the let's say the main structure. In terms of timing, as Juan was mentioning, the GCF Regional Support Program has been approved in March, but it's tied up with also the investment. So although we've really worked closely with the GCF team to proceed quickly on the signature of the financial agreement, there's still a couple of post-approval steps to be done. But finally, it ended up quite well, because meanwhile we will hopefully have the GEF PIF approved, and then we'll start to work on the full design, hoping that actually both could start really at the same time. So it seems that we are that's working on quite well in terms of timing. What else? Yeah, that's a bit where we are, and I've been, of course, there's a couple of things as this, as Juan and Chiz has mentioned. This is the long-term vision is a vision, and it's ongoing. No, so it will, as it's being implemented. No, it's a learning process. So there's a couple of maybe also challenges, or that we could see, or that we're looking forward to work closely with the GEF and GCF and with countries. To see how this kind of joint programming can work in terms of the, concretely having different, maybe different ways, also different models, different examples, because the NDA's operation focal point, sometimes are same institution, sometimes not. So that's something, and both of them have their own process in terms of consulting and programming. So I think there would be interesting to hear a little bit more about, and as the piloting and with 5 countries will move on, to see how how this is happening, and how can we also support or be present. So that's one aspect, and there's maybe others, but I don't know if there's time, Juan, to go into these, or I can also stop here. Let me know. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Actually, I will really appreciate hearing those further views. Let's maybe go on a second round, because I would like to now also invite our colleague Yolando from the UNFCCC Secretariat to share some reflections. And I come to you, Lando, particularly given that, as was mentioned in our presentation, complementarity and coherence in the climate finance has been raised as a very important subject in the UNFCCC. So how do you see the LTV contributing to address this matter? And particularly under your coordination, the UNFCCC Secretariat has, for example, recently organized a workshop on climate finance with participation of countries and representatives of GEF, GCF, and the AF. It would be helpful then to hear your perspective on how capacity and coordination of country priorities, what were some of the reflections and what have been discussed during this meeting that could be helpful, and how we can be helpful to that effect. Over to you, Lando.
Thanks, Juan, and thanks, Cheese. Good morning, colleagues, and it's a pleasure to be here. And after 30 years in the process, it's a joy to see that GEF and GCF would eventually be working closely. Indeed, as Cheese mentioned earlier, where the COP always remind both operating entities to work together. And this is indeed a great initiative that I'm sure the COP, the CMA, the parties will look forward to. And personally, I also thank for using the acronym LTV, because that's my initials, Lando T. Velasco. So every time I hear Juan or some speakers talked about what can LTV do to address this issue, then I get scared. But definitely, I would be a fan of LTV from now on. But yeah, Juan, you referred to the training workshop we organized 2 weeks ago in Maldives for the island states, 6 island states in the Indian Ocean, and. That training workshop itself is a taste of how GEF, GCF, AF, and other institutions would actually start to collaborate, work together for countries and the region. Oftentimes, we see individual institutions, either GEF, GCF, AF, do the readiness, do their training, do their briefing. And the perspective from the countries and the region is that you deal directly, individually with these institutions. And the moment we do that, we forget that there are other institutions actually that are involved on climate finance. No? It's as if that when we deal with AF, we deal individually with GEF or GCF, that the whole climate finance universe is just between us and these individual institutions. So one of the important lessons learned and insights, as a matter of fact, and probably Esteban, who was there, and some of the supposed colleagues who are here that joined the training, is that at some point the participants no longer see the experts, because we had experts from GEF, GCF, AF joining the training as trainers. They no longer see them as institutions, but they see them as one single institution providing resources to them. And that's probably something that, as a matter of fact, the needs-based finance is pursuing, advocating at the country level. That climate finance is all sources, and countries have that ability to access actually public, private, domestic, international resources. It's only a question of how countries are enabled to be able to make use and maximize these different sources. And it was, I took several pictures, not of the participants, but of the GEF, GCF, and I said, this is worth posting on our website to see how institutions can actually work for countries and for the regions. No? Oftentimes, the challenge when institutions deal with countries is that they, especially at the bilateral level, is that they tend to focus more on what their institutions can offer to these countries and regions. No? But during the training, the focus were the participants, no? not the institution. So that's one important lesson that we gained out of that training. Second, it was also useful to hear. I think somebody earlier raised about assisting countries understand the different processes of the GEF, GCF, AF, and other institutions. So, for example, climate rational. How does GCF, GEF, AF define? This is climate. Do they have differences? And it's important to understand the context. These different institutions provide support to countries on climate, but they also have their own institutional mandate, visions, goals, objectives, and that's where the differences lie. No? And it's important, for example, during the training where countries try to understand, okay, so climate rational for GEF is this, climate rational for GCF is this, and at some point, participants realize that there's not much difference. It's just a matter of them hearing directly from these institutions at the same time rather than individually. Now that's one thing. So I was referring to the collaboration between the institutions. But one thing that also made the participants realize is that they need to collaborate also at the country level. Remember that at the country level, there is a GEF focal point, there is a GCF NDA, there is the AF designated authority, and etc. That at the country level, they also need to be collaborating. And mirroring the collaboration between the institutions, and I'm sure that when Cheese and Juan talked about programming, etc., that at the country level, the focal points and coordinators of these different funds will start to collaborate also. So collaboration is not only happening at the international and the institutional level, but also more so at the national level. And something that we hope to achieve in this project, which by the way is a mandate from COP in 2017 to the Secretariat to assist developing countries assess their needs and translate those needs into actions. But the important mandate to us also is to collaborate with different institutions in pursuing this, especially with the operating entities. And for us, the one indicator of success is the term collaboration happening at the country level, at the regional level, at the institutional level. After we had some reflections, at least the training team, of course, composed of GCF, GEF, AF, and the Secretariat and others. Something that we start to envision is that if the participants would be the focal points of these different institutions, take part in this training workshop. For one, Juan asked me about the capacity. Capacity is available at the country level. It's only a matter of retooling them. all of our countries have experiences developing projects, development projects and others. So now the question is, how do we make those skills fit and match to be able to access climate finance? So it's only an incremental part. The large part actually is the ability of these different institutions, agencies at the country level and institutions at the international level to really work, given that the resources needed and also the efforts needed to achieve the objectives of the Convention, the Paris Agreement, based on the NDCs and NAPs is enormous. And that's why all this collaboration, the long-term vision, is not just about the end goal is not collaboration. The end goal, as a matter of fact, is to be able to enhance access and improve the mobilization of finance. So all these are just means. So at the end of the day, no matter how we collaborate, if countries are still not able to access finance and still not able to mobilize finance, then we fail. So, as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So it's at the end of the day, if countries are able to access finance, mobilize resources for NDCs and NAPs, and something that we hope for the needs-based finance project, and something I hope for the collaboration between GEF and GCF, is it gets expanded. So it doesn't end with GEF-GCF collaboration. But as a matter of fact, it gets expanded with other multilaterals, bilaterals, including private sectors, so that then again, going back to countries, regions, they see all of these as one effort to support their work. Finally, I also hope that as progress is made in this collaboration, joint work by GEF and GCF, that it will no longer be a long-term vision, but a short-term vision for collaboration, coherence, and joint work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lando. That was a really comprehensive and rich perspective, and we certainly share now the LTV acronym with you, so that's even more to take forward. I'd like to open the floor for any reflections as well that you might want to share with us, and of course any questions you might have for either for us or for the panel. I see a few hands. If we can start, and please certainly if you can identify yourself.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Luis Navarro. I work at the Ministry of Economy in Brazil and also the designated authority for GCF. I have some questions about the implementation of this initiative. If you have a timeline, how is the process? And also how countries can submit the investment plans. I want to know if when you say investment plan, it means a funding proposal, or it's an investment plan as a whole, and under this investment plan, you can, once it is approved, you can submit funding proposals for both funds. And also about coherence, we know that the criteria used for each of these funds are very different, and we have some accredited entities that they prefer to present or submit proposals in one fund than other, because the criteria are more predictable, I may say that. And we have another fund that the criteria are still a mystery for us. So I think I stop here. It's few questions. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask you to pass the microphone to the lady there. And we'll just maybe take a few questions and we can come back. Thank you.
Sorry, it's on, right? Yes. Hi, thank you very much. Very interesting panel. My name is Julia. I'm from IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. I have a question, I guess, in general to the panel, not to anybody in particular. There's quite a number of small-scale grant mechanisms that exist around climate, environment, sustainable resource management, and so on. Like, for example, the one we have in IUCN, which is the Global Fund on Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. So my question was, from your perspective, what would be your advice or maybe guidance how these grant mechanisms can position themselves to better support the activities that also contribute to this long-term vision between GCF and GEF? Because, yeah, to avoid fragmentation of efforts and that so that we all move kind of in the same direction. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm Dirk Snyman from the Pacific Community, SPC, an accredited entity to GCF and also to Adaptation Fund. This is perhaps building on the question already asked by our colleague over there, but maybe just expanding it a bit further in terms of facilitating access to climate finance, which was just mentioned in the last talk as well. And it's not only the different criteria, I think, but also the different processes. And so my question is, when we see, for example, work that's been done under GEF for the last few decades, when trying to upscale or replicate that, for example, under GCF, is there an expectation that's at some point during the long-term vision that might expedite proposals going through the process? We look at, for example, the fast-track accreditation of entities, which have made it comparatively easier for entities already accredited with one of the funds to then become accredited with another fund. But our experience is that in reality, when we're trying to submit proposals building on a proven model to another fund, you're starting from scratch again, from zero, because you still have to go through the other funds, all of their processes, and make the rationales and the justifications. And for some of the governments that we work with, they sort of say, well, then what's the point in all the collaboration and the discussion and getting this internal coherence where at the end of the day, you're just submitting a project from zero again. You might as well just focus all your energy on the project proposal instead of all the talk around that. So just a question on whether we can expect, and I know it's impossible to give a timeline, but when it might be feasible for seeing, let's say, fast-track replication or upscaling or approval of processes, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's maybe stop with those three questions for now, and then we'll come back for more. If I may just sort of take perhaps the liberty to respond to the colleague from Brazil and on this last question as well on access and scaling up. So in terms of plans, right now the steering group that was created has launched a 2-year work program. And we are in the process of implementing this, but of course it won't stop there. We're just trying to identify how to get this work started. And like I said, the progress report is going to the council and to the board in the coming months. Now, in terms of your question on a common investment plan, I think that's precisely why we're trying to do this exercise with 5 pilot countries, because there's certainly not one single solution that will fit every country. Planning contexts in different countries are very different. I mean, I'm sure, for example, in the case of Brazil, say, versus other countries that might sort of choose to have, for example, a GCF country program versus having just a consolidated national plan. So we want to explore different options rather than sort of coming with one single approach. Most importantly, of course, we want to make sure is that we're responsive to NDCs and that we sort of see the role of NDCs being sort of the ultimate guiding direction for what the investment needs to be done. But we're open to certainly different models. And on your question of criteria, frankly, couldn't really agree more than what you said, and that's precisely why we're doing this study where we're trying to do this inward looking at our own policies and criteria so that we can have a more coherent response going forward to that. On scaling up, absolutely, and I mean this has been a priority for some time, and I'm actually happy to say, also responding to some of what Lando said, this is something we have also been exploring with the Adaptation Fund, and like I said, at least in the case of the GCF, we have already just made it part of our policies as of a couple of weeks ago through the simplified approval process, where we are giving that clear signal to entities that we want to see this type of interactions. I think that in the case of scaling up, it is particularly important that we give continuity of finance, because what happens very often with these projects is that if one of the projects sunsets, then you might as well start all over. So it will be important that we identify the right entry points for scaling up, and that we also actually take a better look at what does scaling up actually mean. Because it's an area that will require further work. So I don't think we'll have the full answer to what that means quite yet, but this is something that we are now launching, particularly through the simplified approval process, but in our experience that quickly then gets reflected in the GCF in the longer, in the overall sort of project pipeline for the project cycle. So I hope that answers to that. Cheese, maybe I can invite you to speak on well, reflect on this, but also on the small grants question.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm going to try to answer very good questions that were posed from probably a slightly different angle here. Look, you notice when we presented the LTV, it had various elements, from looking at the joint investment plan development, doing communications, but also doing deep dives into policies and programs and processes. And that was done because we are cognizant that this is a fairly complex landscape for countries as well as regional priorities to be addressed through multiple funding streams as well as different policies and processes. And I would also say from different political expectations of the respective boards and the governance structure of the GEF and GCF. And you can also make this more complicated by adding other funds as well as other working streams. So it was a conscious decision that we will look into the policies and processes because it needs to be done, but we can't really wait for that to start engaging in the countries as well as major initiative identification as well as support. And the precise reason is we are going to go ahead and do these kinds of policy and process analysis that will probably identify, practical entry points, but I'm sure it's also going to identify some structural challenges from the perspective of the funds, but also from the countries to come to access them. And a lot of these structural challenges aren't necessarily there because somebody didn't put enough thought into them. I mean, there are good reasons for a lot of these policies and programs that have been developed within the GEF, within the GCF, from the countries and so on and so forth. So I think we kind of need to be cognizant that addressing those will require some political will as well as effort of all the entities as well as countries, and I would say the political will of the governance to move forward. But for that to happen, at least we need to put on the table a good analysis of what it is that the different funds are doing and what the process that would enable us to really help the countries and climate priorities to be addressed in a more effective way. But some of the elements that we think would need to be addressed in the medium to longer term. Coming back to your question of joint investment planning, so far what's happened, I would say, in the past 4 to 5 years, we have had a number of projects where, let's say, there was a readiness support by the GCF. We tried to do a little bit more robust proof of concept with the GEF and GCF, or we've had significant investment opportunity from the GCF under, for instance, private sector or what have you, where the early lessons from the GEF and GCF could be upscaled. There are different modalities to go about this, but I think it's fair to say those that have worked were because agencies and countries were savvy and also opportunistic in a good way, right? And we want to encourage that, but for us to move ahead, we need to do a little bit more engagement as well as collaborative process at the country level to develop these national joint investment plans. And that cannot just happen by having one workshop in Brazil or Senegal or whatever. There has to be a process that would need to be agreed upon by ourselves as well as a country, that there is commitment for you to really look into how the funds in different work streams can support your climate agenda, and where the GEF or the GCF can come together to support some common elements, or where different funds can come in to support other elements, or the GEF might go into certain aspects alone and GCF might do that alone, so on and so forth. So that kind of mapping out of where you see the investment plans for climate moving forward is the commitment that we have made to do, right? So this is why we were saying we want to start with 5, because this is going to entail significant amount of effort, time, as well as goodwill for it to be successful. So I hope I answered your question. Sorry, I was a little bit long. So on your question on how the different funding streams and efforts can come together, I am of the opinion that impact is not necessarily corresponding to the size of the resources, right? Sometimes at the community level, or if you're trying to do proof of concept, or if you want to provide a targeted support to a theme that is actually emerging, but it might not be actually proven or accepted within the country, community, or sector perspective. This is where the kinds of targeted support that might be a little bit smaller in scale, but more agile in a way for the decision making could come in very handy. So, under the GEF, we have the small grants program, for instance, right? Which is, in a way within the GEF family, but it has its own more, I would say, streamlined and completely delegated to the country level decision mechanism. And what efforts we have taken so far is to make sure that some of the results and impacts that are coming out of them are also used to help inform larger initiatives and larger programs. But once again, for that to happen, we need to make sure that the different stakeholders as well as focal points are talking to each other and are aware of what's happening. And hopefully, when we have these joint investment plan developments, but more probably broadly national and regional workshops and dialogues, the efforts to connect the dots between the GEF and GCF, but beyond, to engage with other funding streams can help to really make it more, explicit in the minds of the national stakeholders that there is an opportunity for this, common threads as well as connecting the dots exercise to be more effective. So that's one of the things that we really want to focus upon. Thanks.
I'm very mindful of time. I certainly also want to give our colleagues in the panel a chance for closing thoughts, and we still have a question pending from Janie, but I'd want to open the floor one last time. I know people have to go, see if there are any further questions. Otherwise, I will turn to Janie and to Lando for any closing reflections on these questions too. Oh, yes, please.
My name is Batchiral from Mongolia. Good afternoon, everyone. Just first of all, I would like to express to GF and GCF for this very good initiative on collaboration for complementarity and coherence. To my knowledge, GCF also has some cooperation arrangement with Adaptation Fund. And I have two small questions. One is, every country for cooperation with GCF is going to develop so-called country program. And how in this country program, the cooperation with Adaptation Fund, GF can be reflected? And second one is, of course, GF and Adaptation Fund usually have some quote for developing countries, depending on their financial cycle and so on. How this quote can be affected, changed because of cooperation between these three operating entities? Thank you.
Francis Impamp from Zambia. I may have missed the response, but I just want to know the criteria that you're using to arrive at the 5 countries. And also the other follow-up question is, do we see in the medium to long term a change, especially for the GCF, in the simplified approval process, given the LTV? Thank you.
Thanks, Solomon from the UK. That was a really interesting talk. I've got a few questions, but I will try and keep it to 1 or 2 because there's 8 here. So first of all, I'll be very sad if it's a short-term vision because then they won't share the initials for Lando. That's very sad. But I guess the 5 countries that you were talking about, I was wondering how they might work with the Task Force on Access 5 pioneer pilots, as well as the 5 Secretary General driven accelerator countries on adaptation, because those are kind of similar initiatives on kind of bringing, focusing on a country and what their needs are and starting from a needs assessment. I guess the study sounds really great. What was the last one? I think that was let's just start with that. How are those things? And basically the long-term vision, that was the question. Long-term vision. What is the long-term vision for the LTV? So it's made up of those 3 parts, but is the idea to arrive at what Lando was describing, a kind of single platform where a country can say, you know what, this is what I need, and some of it will come from here, some from here, and here. That was it. Thanks.
Thanks. So let me perhaps start with the question on the tool that can be the development of a country program. And certainly from the GCF perspective, we believe that it does not need to be an exclusive type of document only for GCF, and therefore the opportunities are to be able to use it to understand how each of the interventions, whether directed to GCF or through some of the other institutions, can be better leveraged in the context of the climate finance landscape. And therefore, it's fully an opportunity there to collaborate with others. And perhaps just because of time, I will leave it at that. Maybe, Chis, if I can invite you for any reflections on some of these questions as well before going to Jenny and Lando and before closing.
Okay, thank you so much for that, and thanks for the rich questions. So in terms of the criteria for the 5 countries, we're actually still developing the criteria, and part of the reason is that we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear inputs as well as perspectives from the stakeholders. So, I mean, it's a good opportunity to really hear some suggestions as well as be more mindful of the existing initiatives and how those could, possibly help inform the way forward for us. We already did the pilot initiative. It was literally on demand, right? And that has its own benefits as well as some hiccups in the sense that willingness of the countries, obviously that's going to be the most important factor. I think going into the process with everyone's eyes wide open, as well as really understanding the expectations, as well as the the scheduling and the commitments you're ultimately making is something that I think one of the key elements that came out of the pilot phase, that you really need to make sure that the countries are aware and willing and able to not just go through the process, but follow through on the elements that we identified. So that's something that happy to discuss further. So where is this going to go at the end of the day? I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can tell you is that there is a very serious commitment, as well as, it's fair to say, expectation from the parties that we work together, right? So I think really having, I think the extreme case, maybe at the end of the day, there is some kind of a common platform. We don't know if we're going to get there, but at least as part of the LTV, there is also an element related to joint investment platforms, which is not the planning, but the platform for support. So we will see how far we can get on that one. But I would also like to mention that beyond the national programming, there are also regional initiatives that individual countries might not have sufficient incentive or the resources to be able to address. You know, Great Green Wall, I would say, is one good example of that, right? Or the shared ecosystems across the different national boundaries. How do we go about addressing those? So there, I think, in addition to having some kind of a national-based efforts, there obviously would need to be multifaceted efforts within the LTV to move forward. So Great Green Wall is a good example, but how do we work with the private sector entities that might have innovative solutions as well as potential to be rolled out in multiple countries, sub-regions, or regions? How do we go about supporting those? And, you know, that, and how do we then reflect those at the end of the day in national programming? So, you know, we're putting this forward, and we started working on this from various perspectives and various elements, including national, regional, and private sector innovation. And so I think at the end of the day, my hope is within 5 years, we'll see some tangible progress on all those fronts. And collectively, we should be able to say that the operating entities of financial mechanism made tangible contributions to advance on those agendas and ultimately managed to support countries and priorities to make a difference. So I think that's what we want to see. Thank you.
Jane?
Thank you. Quick final thoughts, but just, yeah, I think would be on this study, on the processes and policies. I think having worked, myself, but IFAD also with these two programs, we've already know a lot of things where, in terms of processes and, or different criteria, or, even if someone just take the templates, and see what information is required. There is similarities, but there's also differences. So basically, there's a lot of kind of more technical issues, let's say, that, could be, so please use us in a way from our experience to contribute to that study. We've already kind of pinpoint a couple of things that we could improve to make it, if the ultimate goal is kind of the access to climate finance for countries. I would just like to say one more point in terms of, also I hope we'll have the chance to have kind of regional interaction with both funds, because for us, for example, at IFAD, but I know many also other partner, we work a bit at regional level, and that really allow us to, to take part of this discussion and kind of early origination and discussion, project ideas, and how we can, luckily we manage the Adaptation Fund, GCF, GEF, all together, and our regional division are also working with countries and discussing all of them at the same time in a way and seeing which one, but that can be improved, and maybe through this regional discussion, that could be one avenue. So I'll stop here and for a matter of time. Thank you.
Thanks. I will probably borrow from John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine if there's only one country program instead of different different programs. Imagine if all the financial institutions would have aligned their processes and project policies. Imagine if at the country level, different agencies, institutions work together. We will probably we will probably end up in a better world. Thank you.
So with that vision, we like to close this event, and I want to thank you all very much for making the time, and of course to our panelists and for making themselves available. Thank you all very much, and have a good afternoon.